Hello, this is a recording for Monday, October 26th, and also Tuesday, the 27th. And so what was due for y'all for homework was the case study, which is y'all researched an incident or accident of some sort of fossil fuel mining. So the check-in that I did with class was, what is something you did over the weekend that gave you joy? So something I did was that I cooked an elaborate dish. It's a dim sum dish, stuffed eggplant, love it. And then I also voted, which some of you might be able to do soon. So, okay. So again, acknowledgement, we are on Liz-John Aloni land. So the agenda for today is that we're gonna do a quick now. I'll just name the now, and then I'm gonna go over the grading scale and also the LT1 assessment. So, and this is our first assessment for this class, and it's homework. So for the do now, I asked, what do you think your grade in the class should represent? For example, should it represent how hard you tried, how well you learned the material, and how communicative you were to the teacher, etc. And so people gave their answers, and then I transitioned into how I'm going to grade this class. And so the reason I go into that is because I want to be as transparent as possible in order for y'all to succeed, right? And so you can't know how to succeed in a class if you don't know what I'm asking of you. So I'm going to go through a couple examples with you. So grading for APES. How the heck is Mr. grading us? This was a Pear Deck question, which I will not have you answer, but I want to list out two students. And so I want to ask you which student demonstrated mastery of a concept. And so of course, mastery is like the ability to demonstrate full understanding of a concept. So is it student one, where for homework, the student one didn't complete the homework. So they got a 0 out of 5 on this, but they took the quiz at the end of the week and they scored a 10 out of 10. But obviously, when the scores are combined, 10 out of 15 leads to a D. So they scored pretty low on like the average total grade. Now for student two beautifully completed the homework, but then at the end of the week earned a 7 out of 10 on the quiz. And so then I asked of you, which student do you think demonstrated mastery of a concept, irregardless of their total grade? And so people put in their votes for student one or student two, and I personally, via my grading philosophy, I think that student one proved mastery of the content. They scored higher on the quiz, and albeit they didn't do their homework, but maybe they didn't have Wi-Fi that week, maybe they worked a bunch of extra shifts that week, et cetera, and couldn't do the homework. But they worked hard to master it in different ways. But student two actually ends the unit understanding less of the content, but with a higher letter grade than student one. And so to me, that's kind of like a reward system that doesn't quite work. And so I want to shift my grading to reward the student that was able to demonstrate mastery, that showed me that they worked hard to understand the material, even if that means that they didn't complete every single little homework assignment. All right. So I want to show us traditional grading versus mastery-based grading. And so with traditional grading, which is here, you'll see that this is probably how your teachers have graded in the past, where they have different categories like participation, homework, tests, and projects, and they take up different percents of the grade. But what I want to do this quarter, next quarter with y'all is mastery-based grading. And so with that, those are, I want to put together, instead of categories, I'm going to do learning targets. So these learning targets are concepts that I want y'all to have mastery of. All right, so these are the different topics. For example, they're not this quarter's topics, but an example of an environmental science class, and they take up different percents of your grade, depending on how much time we're spending on it, right? And how many assessments I get in for each grade. So we're going to be veering away from this. All right. Now, so for example, I want to pull up an example for y'all, like for mastery-based grading, say one of our learning targets was ocean acidification. It's not, but say it is, and it's 20% of your grade, and I've given 3 assessments on it total, the whole quarter. And with each assessment, these are the scores that the student got in each of the assessments. So I asked students in class, like, what is the final grade that you would give this student, right? I personally would give them an A- because they demonstrated mastery. And that meaning that the student has demonstrated growth and mastery of the concept and thus deserves a grade that reflects that. So what I'm saying is that, like, this student clearly had like a so-so grasp on the ocean acidification during assessment 1. Assessment 2, they clearly had a better grasp on it, worked hard to learn the material. And by assessment 3, they really had it dialed in. And so I don't want to penalize the student for learning, meaning I want their grade to reflect what they have learned at the end versus how they are learning in the beginning. So essentially, I think, to put it plainly, I would drop the grades that I don't think are reflective of how you have worked in this class at the end. All right. So that's maybe a little bit different than you've seen grading in the past. So moving on, zooming out, we're going to look at all of the different learning targets we have this year. And so we have learning targets 0 through 3. So the 0 is professionalism. And so this is something that we'll work on throughout the entire quarter. And it basically means, are you communicating with me? And then are you meeting your deadlines? And so this is 15% of your overall grade. So I think it's important as you move through with your career, with college, that you maintain and learn professional etiquette. Now, learning targets 1 through 3 are kind of like the content. It's like the meat of what we're going to be learning about in class. All right, and so they're different percents depending on how much time we're spending on each of them. All right. So let's focus on, also you'll be assessed on each of these LTs at least twice so that I can have at least 2 different data points to be like, hey, did Rodney improve on, you know, their LT mastery and whatnot. So I'm gonna go into one of the LTs as an example. So I'm gonna go into LT0. So this is a lot of work, bear with me. So LT0, basically, this is the exact same description where you are engaging in class, you're meeting deadlines, blah, blah, blah. So I have a rubric for LT0 that I put in the syllabus, but basically your grade to get an A in professionalism, it means you have to hit 80% of the deadlines in this class. And deadlines meaning when you come to class, if you have a meeting scheduled with me, you make it to them. If you can't you turn in the assignments on time. If you can't turn in an assignment or make it to class, you let me know ahead of time. So I appreciate 80% of that being met, you get an A. Now, subsequently, if as you go down the rubric, for a B, it means you hit at least 60% of all the deadlines, whether it's class or homework assignments or meetings. C is 40%, and D is at least 20%, and an F is less than 20%. So, and remember, you are meeting a deadline if you do not come to class, but you let me know beforehand. All right, that is you meeting a deadline, or you explain afterwards. All right. Okay. So now I want us to, oops. So these are 3 different students, Amaru, Jamil, and Juliana. And so I have listed out their grade reports for assessments 1 through 3. And so I asked students in class to grade each student to see what grade they should receive. And so I'll give you a second to think about that and do it. So what I would give each student, Amaru is similar to the example that I gave. I would give them an A just because they've definitely shown a trend of improving and working hard to do so. Now, Jamil's a little bit more complicated. No shows for 2 assessments, but then turned in like a perfect assessment for assessment 3. So for the final grade, I would schedule a conference with Jamil. And if Jamil told me, he's like, yo, Ms. Tao, I worked a full-time, time and a half for the first like 6 weeks of class, and like I totally missed those 2 assessments, but then assessment 3, I really like cut back on work, and I worked really hard to catch up, and I turned in this A. And I'm like, oh, dope, Jamil, you deserve this A. Let me give you that A, and then we will make a plan as to like how you can continue to do work while also working. But however, if Jamil was like, yo, to be honest, Tal, like, I didn't do the first 2 assessments because I forgot about them. And then when assessment 3 rolled around, I felt so behind that I just copied tomorrow's work. They'd be like, okay, Jamil, like, we got to like get back on track. How are we going to do this? And so either Jamil takes like a different assessment that I create, or we work something else out via conference. All right. But it's always going to be a grade that we come together to talk about. Juliana is like similar in Jamil's, not similar, but kind of a little bit. I would also schedule a conference, or I would give her a B. And the reason I would give them a B if somehow we weren't able to schedule a conference is because she clearly demonstrated that she understood all the content up to assessment 2. But since assessment 2, we've probably learned new material. And so I don't know if she's grasped that new material. And so I would give her a B because it's a little bit of a step back. She didn't grasp everything, but she got most of it, and she showed that. However, my optimal goal is to just have a conference with Juliana and be like, yo, what happened? Like, could you make up this assessment 3? Like, why don't you turn it in like in a few days? All right. So those are some examples that hopefully gives you an idea of how I'm grading you in this class. How you would see it, I want to show you how you would see it in Aries. So right now, this is what somebody sees in their Aries. So, I mean, all of you should see this in your Aries. You have your LT0's assessments, 1 through 3, and then your final score. And so every 2.5-ish weeks, I'll give you a new LT0 assessment based on how you're doing in this class, if you're engaging, if you're meeting deadlines, all right? So since about 2.5 weeks have passed since class started, I gave y'all your first grade. So of course, don't worry if this is not the grade you want as your first attempt. That's okay. You can always contact me and be like, yo, Ms. Tao, I think I deserve like a at least like a 95% because blah, blah, blah. We can talk about that. But don't worry about it. And then also for assessment number 2, I'll fill it out in 2.5 weeks again. And then this serves as like your second assessment and another data point, and if you've progressed in this learning target. So that's your second attempt. Your third attempt will be towards the end of the quarter. And this will be kind of your last assessment. And so this will show me give me a third data point of how you're doing in this class in terms of professionalism. Now, your final score is going to be me looking at all 3 of these and seeing what the trend is. And I'll give you a final score based on, those couple of students that we graded. I'll use that logic to kind of give you that final score. All right. Okay. So a couple of takeaways I want to reiterate, just so we're on the same page. So mastery-based grading, it's about what you know, not necessarily about turning in every single little assignment, all right? Now, for each assessment, there's always going to be a rubric. So I always want you to know exactly what I'm asking of you. And so you can always refer to those rubrics to grade yourself before you even turn it in. Learning targets, you're going to hear me say learning targets a lot, but basically those are like the 4 categories of goals that we're trying to meet this quarter. Grading is mostly going to be on assessments, meaning they're going to be quizzes, tests, CERs, models that we draw and build. And so that's most of your grading will be done on that. Homework is still part of your grade, but it is for practice rather than accuracy. So if you complete it and I see that you've given it a good shot, I will give you full points on it. Also, homework is usually like 10 points, but you'll see that your assessments are usually between like 75 and 50 to 100 points. So your homework is much less points than your assessments. Of course, there's the multiple opportunities rule that I follow, especially this year. And I always want you guys to be demonstrating growth mindset. And so I accept revisions to your assessment. So if you get less than like a 90%, I will put in edit, or like put in comments and bump it back to you for edits, and you can redo it and turn it back in as a revision. All right, questions, comments, concerns? I gave them like a minute break because I was a lot of talking, but we will go on to talking about the assessment number 1. And so this first assessment is a take home. Most of your assessments will be take homes. I think there's only gonna be one that's more exam based. So for the first assessment, we're gonna do a take home CER. I know all of you are like, oh, we love claim evidence and reasoning. Perfect. So claim evidence and reasoning is like the, it's a way to argue something, and it's a way to back up your argument. You can use it with your little brother, you can use it in science, you can use it in English, it all works. So basically, CER is always to be arguing some kind of research question. So your claim is the answer to a research question. Excuse me. Your evidence is the data that supports your claim. And the last part is the thing that kind of trips students up the most, that's the hardest to do, is the reasoning. And the reasoning is where you use logic or scientific principle to explain how the evidence proves the claim. And so the reasoning is kind of the glue that holds the evidence and claim together. So this is going to be like the longest part and also the most important part. All right. So I'm going to give an example CER. You may have seen this if you took AP Bio, but an example CER is this. So the research question is, where is the most painful location for a honeybee sting? Where in your body? And so the claim that this person came up with is that the nostril is the most painful location for a honeybee sting. Okay, yikes, that sounds painful. And the evidence that this person cites is that Mr. Ewing stung himself with honeybees. On a scale of 1 to 10, he notices stings at the nostril had an average pain rating of 9. This is more than the average pain ratings of 5.5 for stings on other parts of the body. So that's data that supports the claim. The reasoning is that this observation can be explained by the fact that pain is more intense at locations with thinner skin. Reaction to that pain are also greater at openings of the body for protection purposes. So these openings are where the stings are most painful because it has thinner skin. So basically this person that's writing the CER is explaining the evidence and then connecting it back to the claim. All right, so for the first APES assessment, I am asking for you to write a CER. And your CER is going to focus on LT1, so the non-renewable energy resources that we've been studying. So your research question is, which non-renewable energy source is the most harmful in its extraction process? So meaning, which of these renewable energies, coal, natural gas, or oil, has the most harmful mining process, whether it's the people, to the economy, or to health. All right. So we're going to roll through an example real quick, just to orient you before you start your CER. Okay, so we're going to start with the claim. So the research question, again, is which renewable energy resource is the most harmful in its extraction process? And so I asked students to write a claim, and a sentence that you can start with is, the non-renewable energy resource that is most harmful in the extraction process is ... So in the rubric, you want to make sure that you completely answer the research question, not just partially. You want to make sure your claim is scientifically accurate, it's specific, and a complete sentence. All right, so people popped a bunch of claims in and they were dope. I'll show you one that I wrote that I think meets this A criteria. So I wrote that the non-renewable energy resource that is most harmful in its extraction process is natural gas. Very simple and open-ended. Some people wrote a claim that is more specific, such as harmful in its extraction process is natural gas because it harms wildlife and property. All right, so then you have to talk about property and whatnot. Now, moving on to evidence. So my evidence meets all criteria. The criteria are that you compare fossil fuel you choose to a different fossil fuel to strengthen your argument. So you're comparing natural gas to another fossil fuel to be like, natural gas is clearly more harmful than this one. You include relevant data or observations or articles or quotes, whatever you want, and it's specific and accurate. I put a strike through here because you need to provide more than one piece of evidence, but we're only going to look at one piece of evidence right now. And so in the pear deck, I gave you 3 different examples, and I wanted you to choose which evidence fulfills all 3 requirements of this. So give me 1 second. So these are the 3 options that I provided on pear deck, and I'll give you a sec. If you want to pause the video and read them, go ahead. And in 3, 2, 1, I will give an explanation. So for this, B is the piece of evidence that hits all 3 criteria because it talks about fracking, which is the way you would mine natural gas, and it compares it to oil. So that checks this box right off the bat. It includes relevant data or observations. This is an observation that fracking causes earthquakes. And then also it's specific and it's accurate. So basically, I would choose B because there's the comparison, which A and C do not have. All right, so that's a good piece of evidence. Now for reasoning, I wanted you to choose which reasoning fits all of the criteria for that would get it an A. So of course the reasoning has to include the scientific principle or logic. It has to explain how the evidence supports the claim and also provide a deep analysis of the evidence. It should also be concise and clear. So we're going to use the evidence fracking causes earthquakes while drilling of oil does not. And what reasoning would connect this evidence, support this evidence, and connect it back to the claim. So I gave 2 different choices, but they're both really long. So I'll just explain the one that I think is correct. And so it goes as so: fracking causes earthquakes because in order to extract natural gas, water mixed with chemicals and sand must be pumped at high speeds into the ground in order to fracture the earth and release the natural gas. The force of the water mixture to cause the fracture triggers earthquakes, which damage property and disrupts wildlife. Oil drilling does not trigger earthquakes, and therefore extracting natural gas is more harmful than oil extraction. Okay, so this is a long reasoning, but basically I want to point out that right here in my first sentence about fracturing the earth, it includes a scientific principle or logic. So like it explains how fracking works and why it causes earthquakes. Now in this blue part, it extrapolates further and has an analysis of like, this fracturing is what triggers the earthquake and thus leads to property damage and disrupts wildlife. So that's a deeper analysis. And then the red is oil drilling does not trigger earthquakes and therefore extracting natural gas is more harmful than oil extraction. And that explains how and why the evidence supports the claim. And then I thought it was pretty concise and clear, just because it followed the logic train. All right. So pause if you need to read that, otherwise I will continue. Okay, so for your assessment, it is in your Google Classroom, and all of the assessments will be labeled really clearly with the learning target and then what assessment number it is. So if you go into your APES classroom, you'll see under non-renewable resource, there's a new document, and it is this. So to walk you through this is the last part. Of course, there's the research question, and then you will answer all of the questions up here, right here. And so I have the claim, and then you have to provide 3 pieces of evidence. And then each of them should have a reasoning. And so I've provided sentence stems for the evidence and reasoning that you can of course use in these 2 as well. Now you might be wondering, like, where do I find all of the like facts and articles and stuff? And so I've left you a bunch of resources, and these are all things you've seen before. So this is the assignment you did on case studies. This is the last week's lecture slides with a lot of information on it. Here are some coal mining artifacts that you may have gone through for the group slides about coal and natural gas mining that you made. Here's natural gas mining, and then here's the lecture. Today's lecture on CER is also attached here. So here are a bunch of artifacts. You should be able to use these resources to answer the evidence and the reasoning part. If you choose to use resources outside of it, that is totally fine. Just include them in the resources box. All right. This is the rubric. It's the same thing that y'all have been seeing. It just includes the B through F section. Yeah. That is all. This is due, of course, just like every other class. This is due the night before the next class, so it's due Wednesday at midnight. And then just a quick reminder that I have office hours Mondays and Thursdays in Discord from 1:30 to 2. So you're always welcome to that. And that was it for this class. So I know that was a bit long. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully I'll see you in class next time. Goodbye.